Hello, everyone. Happy Monday and welcome to Hyphen Live. My name is Karsten. I am the content strategy lead here at Hyphen. And as you can see, I am joined today by Nat, our co founder and marketing strategist, and by Tam, our client experience manager. Hello to you both.
Hi. Hi,
And
Karsten.
hello to everyone who is joining us live today. It is wonderful to have you here. So, today we are going to be talking about the power of audience building on LinkedIn. I know typically we have 20-minute hyphen lives. This month rather, we're going to do, because we have three of us, we might go a little bit long, but it will be worthwhile. So, please stick around if you can. What we're going to be talking about is really how B2B businesses can use LinkedIn to build an audience to support the marketing of their business, and specifically how to do that by getting their senior executives on LinkedIn. Nat's going to be starting off talking about kind of that from a motivations and expectations and strategy perspective. I'm going to then take over and talk a little bit about it from how to take that strategy and translate that into a plan. And then Tam is going to talk about how to take a plan and then translate that into action with tactics and implementation. So, to set the scene for this, I have two numbers to share. The first is just to kind of explain why this is relevant, why we're talking about this. The first is the 95-5 rule. I'm sure if you're in B2B marketing, you've undoubtedly heard about this, but it's basically the idea that at any given point, only about 5% of your target market is actually in buying mode. The rest are not. So this really speaks to why it's important to build an audience, because we want to look at that other 95% and we want to be speaking to them even if they're not in buying mode. We want to be connecting with them, building rapport with them as a business through marketing. So that's where the whole idea of audience building comes in. We're not just going after the people who are hot leads right now. We want to nurture an audience for the long term to make it more sustainable. The other big number is 81%. And that's a figure from a Weber Shandwick study from a few years ago that found that 81% of the global executives they surveyed found that having a CEO who is publicly visible, has a good visible public profile, is important for the business to be highly regarded. And I think it's fair to kind of extrapolate that a bit and say, this is why it's really important, and there's an opportunity for getting senior executives active on LinkedIn and how they can contribute to that audience building. So that's kind of the context of what we're talking about today. And now I want to turn it over to Nat. And Nat, I mean, we've worked with quite a lot of and continue to work with quite a lot of executives and help them with this sort of LinkedIn enablement. Can you talk to us and tell us kind of what are the initial conversations that you would have with these leaders who want to build a LinkedIn presence and support their business's marketing?
Yeah, such an important question that can potentially lead someone to starting this impactful initiative. And yet, we all know that we have limited number of hours in the day. So, what is that kind of balance, and where do you go, right? Like, where do you start? So, the four questions that I'm about to share, we discuss with leaders to help them understand what it will take for them to create an engaged audience on LinkedIn. And this conversation kind of has led to a 50-50 split between an executive or a senior leader saying, yes, sign me up, I'm game, or, you know what, this is just not the right time for me at the moment. So the four questions are, what value do you bring to the world? Are you ready to share your full self with the world? What's your commitment like in terms of time, enthusiasm, and energy, as well as why are you doing this, which is my favorite question. So, what do you want to gain from this initiative? Now, these questions are quite deep, and the initial conversation isn't really meant for us to dive into the answers, but rather to show that the leader has to be sufficiently motivated and has to have realistic expectations for them to take this on. Because the reality is, and I cannot uh, state this more clearly and bring more impact to this, but the reality is that shouldn't outsource this. You have to be involved, and it is your initiative, and it's important that you are involved, even when working with someone else to support you through this journey.
Nat, you mentioned that these initial chats can go 50-50. In your experience, why do executives tend to hesitate when you walk them through this? And what are some of the holdups that you've noticed in these conversations?
Right. Really good question. I'd say that out of those four questions that I just walked through, the one that makes executives and senior leaders, especially in Canada, because that's who we deal with the most, but hesitate the most is the second question about sharing their full selves on social media, mostly because initially when they hear that question, the mind automatically goes to, oh my God, do I now have to share my personal life on LinkedIn? And that is not the case at all. Thing is, building an audience isn't the same as getting as many people as you can to follow you or connect with you on LinkedIn. Building an audience indicates that you have an interesting, unique, and a personal point of view that help others relate to you, which will help them notice you, make them feel like they know you and trust you. And as a result of that kind of ongoing sharing, they will be more likely to want to reach out to you, to get to know you, or to even do business with you or your firm. So sharing your full self on LinkedIn helps those whom you'd like to attract to see you as a wholesome human, not just an executive or like someone who just sits in their office and like the traditional thought process of I'm too busy for everybody, right? So I think an example would be helpful here. And the one that comes to mind is one of our clients shared a post that used a sports metaphor to contrast leadership styles. Now, in and of itself, that's not groundbreaking and fairly commonly done these days. However, this particular metaphor came to them while at a sports game with their family. And so we encouraged them to share more of that narrative as well as a photo of the family instead of the photo of the game itself or using stock photography the way a lot of executives would do. So that kind of brings your full self to this and shares more about you from a personal perspective, but still is very much a professional outlook, right? So this post is still being engaged with, and it's been months since it's been shared. It's one of the most reposted, commented on, and engaged with posts for this executive. And what we have found to be most eye-opening after speaking to this executive months and months after this post has been shared is that it has made people feel more compelled and at ease to come up to them and speak to them because they felt they had that common ground. And I think that is so beautiful. Just breaking that barrier between leadership and senior executives and just even an intern or someone in another firm saying, hey, you went to that game, I went to that game, and it's funny that you picked up on that metaphor. I was actually thinking the same thing. So it just keeps the conversations flowing and just makes that initial connection so much easier. Paying attention to the time, I just wanted to move away from theory and talk a little bit more about practice. And Karsten, when a leader is excited and wants to get moving on building their audience on LinkedIn, how would you recommend that they strategically approach going about that? Karsten, I believe you're muted. Technical difficulties.
Wow, that's no good. Sorry about that. Before I answer your question, I just want to say thank you to those of you who are commenting live on the event page. Hi, Pam. Hi, John. Nice to see you're joining in today. I also want to say if anybody out there who's watching has specific questions for us, feel free to drop them in the comments. If we have time and we can, we'll get to them. If not, we'll address them after the fact. But Nat, to get back to your question, Yeah, to take that kind of the idea and the goal of getting these executives active on LinkedIn, how do you then translate that into a plan? I think there are three key steps to that. You really have to focus on making a plan that kind of aligns specific business objectives with key topics and messaging. So you don't want to approach this as kind of winging it or random acts of content. You really want to have a plan in place. The second step is really to provide value to your audience. I can get into that later about what that actually means. And then the third step is to bring your personality and your personal perspectives into these efforts. You mentioned earlier, Nat, that it doesn't mean that you have to be, as a senior executive, sharing all of your personal life on LinkedIn. That's not what I'm saying, but there does have to be kind of a personal element and bringing some opinions and that sort of thing directly from the executive rather than from the corporate marketing messaging book. So I would say those are the three key steps really to get started with an initiative like this.
Karsten, these are all wonderful steps that a senior exec can take to start building out a LinkedIn strategy, but are you able to expand on them just a little bit more?
Yeah, certainly. So I think with that idea of kind of aligning business objectives and topics and messaging, I mean that is really it's going to be different for everyone because everyone's business is different and it depends on the role of the individual. For example, a CEO, they might be more focused on using LinkedIn maybe for overall brand building for their firm. They might use it, so that might be their objective. They might be using it for more nurturing and building kind of a corporate culture by being transparent, by being open and sharing kind of what's happening. It might be more if it's somebody like if it's a CTO or something, they might be talking about kind of the future of tech in their field. So it's really that idea of looking at what are the goals. Is it brand building? Is it recruitment? Is it demand generation? Is it corporate culture building? And then aligning that then with some topics and key messages. And then, then you build from there. Then you start filtering that out into, okay, what do individual posts look like? But you have to start with that idea, that plan right at the start. The second part is kind of how do you actually grow or build and grow an audience on LinkedIn? And I think the key there is you have to do it by providing value to that audience. If you're if you're a senior executive and all you're using LinkedIn for is to kind of make sales pitches for your business, whether it's kind of thinly veiled or just explicit sales pitches, people are going to lose interest really fast. They're not going to stick around and come back to see, what's the sales pitch this week. So instead, it's really about providing value to your audience. How do you do that? You have to make sure that you're providing information and content that has an element maybe of entertainment, of education, of sharing future-looking ideas, of thought leadership, and those things don't, they're not necessarily all distinct posts. You're not like doing a tick box saying, okay, this is an entertaining post, tick. It's all a lot more nuanced than that. You can weave them all together, but it's that idea of creating content that your audience, it's going to be useful and insightful for them, and it's going to help educate them and give them something that they can act upon. That's really going to help you build an audience that's going to stick around and keep coming back for the long term. And then the third point is, how do you break through in kind of a noisy media environment? If there's so much content out there, it's so much easier to keep scrolling than it is to stop and read something or watch something or listen to something. So I think an important part of how do you kind of break through that noise is, like I mentioned, with bringing some personality and personal perspectives. And again, this doesn't mean you're posting every day about your dog or your cat. What it does mean is like having, sharing your views and opinions on where your industry is headed. What is the future of your, particular technical field or something like that. It's and it's daring to just have an opinion. It may not be the right opinion all the time, or the consensus opinion. I think it's better to share maybe an opinion that isn't the consensus view if it's something that you truly believe and that you're going to get behind and you have your explanations and your reasons, rather than just if the content that a senior executive is putting out looks and sounds and feels like it was just a big marketing team, brought everything together, and this is kind of the average result of that, again, no one's going to pay attention. You're not going to really build that audience. So dare to bring your personality and your personal views to your content. If you do that, I think you can really make progress on building that audience. I also am keeping an eye on time, and I don't want us to run out. So I've talked a little bit there about kind of the taking it from the strategy, turning that into a plan. Tam, can you take us the next step forward and really talk to us about how do we take that plan, turn that into action in terms of tactics and implementation? I mean, we've worked with a lot of senior executives, so you're speaking from experience. So how does that look for us?
Yeah, of course. So once you develop the strategy and the approach, one of the biggest tactical questions that you're going to want to ask yourself is, what is this process overall going to look like? So some of the things that you're going to want to think about is, who's going to be organizing all of these posts? How are they getting posted on your profile? Is there a review process that needs to take place? We have seen in larger organizations that internal communications teams may need to review all the content before it goes up on an executive's page. So these are all the types of little tactical things that you're going to want to figure out as your engagement gets started, so that when you are ready to post, everything is running as smoothly as can be. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that this process can and should be a collaborative process for a senior executive. So employ the help if you need it from either your internal marketing team or an external team such as ours. And it's just so important to make sure that as a senior executive that you are getting the support that you need in the areas that you need it, so that you're spending your time as effectively and as efficiently as possible. One of the tactics that we've found that's super easy to employ for senior executives is to put aside 1 to 2 times per week for about 10 to 15 minutes each to review items such as industry news, review and engage with your network's posts, and review the engagement on your own posts, and make sure that you're interacting with any comments, shares, or private messages that may come up from those posts. This simple step, if you do it consistently, will help keep your network engaged and growing consistently over time. One of the keys also to tracking your success is consistent reporting. So make sure that you take note of some of the key metrics that you've decided on during your strategy planning, and some of the larger goals that you want to accomplish. So for example, if one of your goals is to grow your audience, one of the key things that you're going to want to take note of is, how many followers do you have within your network, and how many of those followers are consistently engaging with your posts? Are they the type of followers that you want to have in your network? Are they valuable for your brand and for your industry? These are the types of metrics that can help you measure your growth over time if you take note of them at the beginning of the engagement.
That's so important to note, Tam, and thank you. And by the way, doesn't matter how much we practice this, something always goes wrong during a live. And Tam, you are
blurry.
Not. Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but hey, rolling with the punches. Yeah. I think it's really important what you pointed out with respect to the quantitative measurement. If you are looking to grow and build your audience, it's important. A lot of the easiest way we have found executives do that is by making sure that it's the people within their organizations that follow them, or that engage with them. And I mean, that is very important, especially for employee retention and attraction. However, it's also incredibly important, and we have found with executives, they should focus a little bit more on getting out there outside of their organization, and being more present with and mindful when it comes to reaching out to others within other organizations to help grow their audience. So Tam, just want to throw this back to you, because you have talked about quantitative reporting, and I would say in B2B marketing, that has become or any marketing, to be honest. That has become the most important thing that we have been focusing on. However, over the years, we've noticed it's also important to provide qualitative results and talk about those. Do you have any examples you could share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great point. And qualitative results are certainly harder to measure since they're not necessarily based on those interactions or engagements on a specific post. However, those types of metrics are so important to take note of once you do identify what they are, because it helps close the loop on your overall reporting and it helps you know if the efforts that you're employing are in fact successful within the network that you're trying to reach. So there is actually one specific example that comes to mind from a senior exec that we worked with to build out their LinkedIn brand. After months of establishing this executive's brand presence on LinkedIn and measuring all the qualitative results, such as number of posts we were putting up, all the likes that they received, the commentary that they received on it, the shares that they received from those posts, they then told us that they were actually being pulled aside in person by both colleagues from their organization and peers from other organizations, simply just to compliment them on the value of the posts that they were putting up. And these were people who may or may not have been interacting online with the posts, but they did take note and they did go out of their way to say something in person to this individual, which was incredibly valuable. These types of metrics can actually be a lot more valuable than a like or a comment on your post, because it lets you know how these posts are doing directly in your day-to-day network and how those individuals are feeling about what you're doing on LinkedIn. Now, there's one more thing that I want to leave everyone here with, and that is one of the biggest roadblocks that our team has encountered when we've gone through this process. And that's the prioritization of this initiative from a senior executive. So at the start of an engagement like this, people tend to get very excited about it. They're very gung-ho and it's top of mind. But as time comes up, or time goes on rather, other priorities do pop up. So it's important to ensure that this initiative stays top of mind on an ongoing basis for a senior executive, but also in a way that's feasible for everyone who will be working on the initiative, which is why it's so important to understand what a realistic weekly or monthly time commitment is going to look like from all individuals involved, as that's going to be key to having this entire engagement run smoothly beyond that initial phase.
Well, there you have it. Easy peasy mac and cheesy. I hope you all got all that information. We've now given you kind of the steps that we help to take our clients through, and especially senior leaders and executives, on how they should potentially might become companies' influencers on LinkedIn, from theory to practice to execution. We would like to send a big shout out to you all for joining us and listening in on this one and our past LinkedIn Lives. Thank you very, very, very much.